Every culture has a flood story. Every culture has where somebody saved humanity through the flood.
The other thing I've heard is because it's determined or called a worldwide flood, people are like, well, that's impossible. The whole globe couldn't have flooded. What I know from the Bible is hyperbole is the type of language that's used at times with things like this.
Mm-hmm.
For example, in Joshua, it talks about like the Israelites wiped out every man, woman, and child. They destroyed the whole city. And then like the next chapter, there's women from that city and they're intermarrying with them. It's like, well, that's hyperbole. Like they didn't actually we'd use that type of terminology in sports, you know, like we destroyed that team.
Yeah.
We didn't actually kill and wipe out another team, but we beat them pretty badly.
He went yard. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
He shot that thing a mile. Like, well, was it 5,280 feet?
So it's possible when they say,
wait. The Eagles destroyed the Chiefs.
There it is.
Destroyed, like wiped them off the surface of the map.
Yes,
didn't really do that.
So it's possible that the worldwide flood means the world that they knew at that time. Like within reason, these are the communities around us. All of that area flooded, and Noah built the ark in that area. That's I think a reasonable interpretation of the story of Noah.
Yeah,
and that I think creates space for people who might find it unbelievable to think of a flood that covered the entire globe. But I do believe God is sovereign, and He could have created a flood that covered the entire globe.
Yeah, and so this isn't going to be helpful for some people because like they don't want ranges. They don't want spectrums. Like, well, you know, there's a spectrum of the ways you can look at it. They want specifics. And so the specifics over the spectrum is where battle lines are drawn.
Right.
That's where we come, I don't like you, you don't like me. This is what I believe, this is what you believe. And I think what we're advocating for is the spectrum approach to things, is to be able to say like, yeah, Adam, you're right. But the word there in Hebrew is haaretz, which means, it can also mean the land, but it can also mean the earth. You know, like it's kind of, they didn't have an idea of the globe, you know. However, when you look at like the Inca, the Inti, when you look in the Yoruba, when you go over to even Southeast Asia, when you go
Gilgamesh,
the
epics,
don't give me any story on that. It's one of my favorite stories of all time. But what's fascinating in the Gilgamesh story, and what I'm saying is that every culture has a flood story.
Yeah.
Every culture has where somebody saved humanity through the flood. And so in Gilgamesh, you have Utnapishtim. Utnapishtim is this guy who built an ark. The gods told him to build an ark, and they put everybody on the ark, and he saved, and that's how he became immortal. And so you got Gilgamesh going up to Utnapishtim and saying, like, how can I be immortal? And, I don't know, you know. I think what's important in saying that is that the dynamic range of, on the one hand, you can't deny that something happened. A flood happened at some point, and we see evidence of it. There's science for it, and it's fascinating. There are some scientists that argue, and they're like, well, you can't just explain the Grand Canyon by the flood, and you can't talk about instant petrification of wood into stone, and so like you're invalidating all the layers and strata of rocks, you know. So the Cenozoic era never happened, you know. It's like, well, there's a spectrum, and it's okay to have Christ as Lord, to love Jesus, to love people, and to be about the mission of reaching people for Christ while we peruse the spectrum of like, that's interesting.
Yeah, I like how you brought it into what is most important, which is going to be my question. Because if you look at creation, and is it the most important thing that I know if it's 6 literal days or not? Is it the most important thing with the flood? Was it the whole earth? And if it wasn't, does that wreck something? Like, am I at risk? Is someone's faith at risk if they were to actually say, oh wow, so maybe it wasn't a whole earth flood? What should we be taking out of this? What is Genesis really wanting us to walk away with? Is it whether or not it was literal, or is it something else?
One thing I love about the Old Testament is it's a consistent picture of who Jesus is. We see that in the story of Adam and Eve. I think we see that in the story of Noah as well. Noah is one man with his family saving mankind, but because of his righteous acts. And I think continuously in the Old Testament, you see that, like a righteous man like David and Abraham, and it's all like a picture pointing forward to one man who actually would save humanity for all time, and that would be Jesus. So I think as we think about like thinking back to the omelet thing, like that's the omelet.
That's your
like,
favorite analogy.
I love that analogy.
It just made me hungry.
Mine was better, but
that is what God is doing in this story. Is He's like presenting a picture of this is who Jesus will be, and the promise that's to come.
So repeat your question again, because I was going to answer it in a totally different way.
Yep. So I just want to know, how should we be looking at Genesis? And because I feel like I sense this desire that the most important thing from Genesis is whether or not this was literal.
Mm.
But it sounds like that's not necessarily the most important thing. Genesis is maybe trying to get us to pay attention to something else.
Yeah, and again, I'm gonna annoy people. I'm gonna get all kinds of email like, how can you? But I do think it's a range, and I do think it's important to realize that every culture has a flood story, right? So I don't think it could be local. And yet, someone once said this to me, they're like, so you're telling me that kangaroos jumped from Australia over to India, all the way over to where Noah was just to get on the boat? I'm like, well, maybe.
They haven't heard about the kangaroo rafts?
I don't know.
was a
And
thing?
maybe they've adapted since then. You know, that's kangaroos used to be deer, or I don't know, whatever.
Or if there was Pangea at that time, everything was
Yeah.
already land connected.
Yeah, Pangea is an answer for everything.